Welcome, everyone. My name is Scott Lyons. I'm the co-director of Embodied Yoga. And welcome to this session with Dr. ARIELLE SCHWARTZ called Healing the Nervous System Through Breathwork. And ARIELLE SCHWARTZ is a clinical psychologist, EMDR therapy consultant, somatic psychotherapist, and certified yoga instructor. And I'm super excited to have her teaching today. And also she's teaching a class I've been dreaming of taking in October that I'm super excited to learn called Applied Polyvagal Theory in Yoga, and with a special guest, Stephen Porges, which is pretty awesome. And we'll post a link for that too. And I think this will be kind of a little sneak preview even of that amazing material, which I'm excited about.
It sure will be.
Yeah. A few things. If you noticed you're muted, you will stay muted for the session so we can really tune into Dr. Schwartz's session. You can always message me in the chat box on the bottom if there's anything you need. And without further ado, I will turn it over to my friend here, Dr. ARIELLE SCHWARTZ, for
Thank you.
Special offering.
Thank you. Really a pleasure to be here. And I'm going to, as I mentioned, I'm going to share some information and then we're going to breathe together. And what's so interesting about breathing together from across the world, from our own private spaces, is that, when we breathe, the air that comes in and out of our lungs, of our bodies, it is the most direct way that we are connected to each other. And so here in the midst of social isolation, and so many of us who are experiencing being either quarantined again or in lockdown. I've been in conversation with folks who are in countries that have returned back to lockdown over the last few days. And so we just want to be very mindful and thoughtful that to breathe and to breathe into connection can have a lot of different experiences for all of us during this. It can lead us to feel some of the grief that I think is very prevalent in this time. Roxanne spoke a little bit about this at the beginning of her session as well, that our lungs and our relationship to our breath is almost like the quintessential focus of this time in our world. I think, Scott, you've chosen such a well-timed theme right now, because it ties together that experience of not being able to breathe, I can't breathe, as related to our pandemic, as related to smoky skies and the fires, as related to systemic racism. It's just powerful. It's a powerful theme right now. And and our lungs in the Chinese medicine system tend to be associated with grief and with sadness. So I share all of that really just to say that all of you is welcome here, that whatever arises for you in this process is precious and sacred, and that my hope is that you can turn towards yourself with tenderness, because I really feel that that is so much of what this space of the breath asks of us and invites of us. Because as we can breathe and soften and find the subtle movement of the tissue inside, it can open us up to that tenderness towards self, and also open us up toward the care and kindness that emerges forth within us toward other. I'm going to dive us into this little bit of a slideshow here, and then we'll come off of that so we can connect a little bit more face to face. But here in this journey of healing the nervous system through breath, which functions here? There we go. So In contrast to what Roxanne just brought you through as a body-mind centering journey into the anatomy of the spaces in the body, the tubes of the body, the anatomy of the breath system, we're going to shift gears and look at the anatomy of the nervous system in relationship to our breath. And I'm going to just go real brief here. We could spend hours on this topic, and we can do that together in October. But for now, just to recognize that the vagus nerve is so deeply connected to our breathing system. And that if you look at the image here on the right, that we can see that the vagus nerve is linking us to, I'm just going to shrink my little image here, linking us to the to the eyes, to the ears, into the mouth, into the larynx and pharynx, into the heart and lungs, through the diaphragm, and then innervates into all of the organs of the body. It's a bidirectional highway, information highway, that communicates between mind and body, and primarily about information about our autonomic nervous system. And 80% of this information comes in the upward direction, is coming from body to the brain. So that our bodies are often sensing and relating to what is happening in the world around us, even prior to our minds knowing or making sense of it, right? So that we are neurocepting, our nervous system is perceiving information from our world that we may or may not have any conscious awareness of. In fact, often the information that we're perceiving from our world slides in underneath our conscious awareness and can lead to a variety of responses within us. When we look at the vagus nerve, what we can recognize is that we have a tiered response, and especially in relationship to threat, because our nervous system is evolutionarily designed to pick up or attune to threats in the environment. Our most recently evolved part of the nervous system, or vagus nerve, is our social engagement system. It's the upper part of the vagus nerve. It connects into heart and lungs and throat and inner ear and facial muscles, right? But it allows us to have that social connection. So we express, and I'll actually stop share here for just a second, because I think it's so nice to see this, like we express right through here, right? So that you can hear in my voice tone, you can see in my face the cues that signal that I'm reaching toward you, that I'm interested, that I'm connected, right? This is a funny forum, Zoom, because we don't really get to totally see each other and perceive each other in the ways that would be, I think, more mutually reciprocal and nourishing, but we do the best that we can. I think that, as Scott says, sometimes in here we can switch to gallery view in our Zoom settings, which is so nice because we can all kind of look around and really sense that we're not alone. We're here with each other. We are listening and connected. And that is so important during this time, especially of more isolation, right? So, coming back into our journey through the nervous system, when we go under, you experience some kind of threat, and again, this can come into our nervous system underneath awareness. We can go into a sympathetic nervous system mobilization, where we feel keyed up in a fight or a flight response. And if there's no way to mobilize ourselves back into a sense of safety, if we're experiencing chronic threat with no way out and no perceived sense of control, then an evolutionarily older part of the nervous system can begin to kick in, which leads us to feel more immobilized, helpless, or collapsed. At one point, Roxanne said something that was so lovely, which is that child's pose isn't a collapse. And when we're yielding, when we're relaxing, when we're softening the body into a resting state, if we are in some way or another have a habituation in our nervous system to collapse, rest and collapse can get fused. So part of what we want to restore in body and mind and in healing is to tease apart those two states so that we can actually reclaim healthy immobilization for healthy sleep and healthy rest. And we can also reclaim healthy mobilization, because our sympathetic nervous system, it's not all bad. In fact, it's, we want to befriend it. And in times of safety, it's what allows us to play and mobilize into the world in really satisfying ways. So here in this particular slide, we're just looking at the recognition that our nervous system doesn't just live in the brain. It exists throughout the whole body. And in one particular way of this, to recognize that the brain stem, which is our lowest part of the brain, the part of the brain that most directly habituates to our life experiences, that creates these habits of movement or habits of sleep and wake cycles, habits of breath patterns that, that again can exist within us without even conscious awareness. But that there is no clear distinction of where the low brain ends and where the spinal cord begins. It's one long, I kind of like this image because it makes us feel like we're fish, right? Or we're snakes, we're one long organism. And you'll see when we come into movement that I'm going to invite some undulating type movements today, because it helps us soften this idea that there is some rigid distinction between the head, the neck, the torso, the pelvis. And yet when we hold fight, flight, or trauma in the body, we can start to feel cut off or hold tension patterns that lead us to feel more robotic. So as we come into undulating movements of the spine, we have this capacity to feel ourselves as actually much more deeply connected inside. One of these areas in particular that I want to speak to on this slide is the medulla. And here, what we're looking at is that the medulla serves this autonomic nervous function for the breath and our heart rate. Also swallowing and sneezing and some other core regulating factors. But it's the hub also for all of our sensory and motor nerves, including the vagus nerve. And as we come into the breath practice, there is a very, very important relationship between the information that the vagus nerve senses in the lungs and communicates back up to this medulla in the brainstem, in the low brain, that is giving information about the changing relationship between oxygen and carbon dioxide, so that the medulla can actually create a new habit or a new pattern of breath. So our sensory nervous system, once again, our nervous system isn't just our brains and our spinal cord, but it extends out into our limbs. So we get this sense of the whole body as this sensory system, right? And we have our external senses of our sight and sound and smell and taste. We have our interoception of awareness of the internal sensations of the body. And we have proprioception, which is, where are we in space? How much space are we taking up? What shape am I creating with my body? When we come to yoga practice, we tend to spend a lot of time focusing on proprioception and exteroception. We create a shape of the body, maybe we have a focal point or a drishti with the eyes on some external point or at the tip of the nose, right? And so we have awareness of this kind of shape of the body or the exterior and the external senses. As we deepen into an embodied yoga journey, we wake up interoception, where we begin to get very curious about the subtle internal sensory experience. It might be the temperature of the hands or the air going in and out of your nose, right? It might be a sense of heaviness in the chest, or of churning in the belly, or a knot in the throat. And that interoceptive journey begins to awaken and elucidate our relationship to our emotions and our viscera, and it allows us to go from what might be a more form-based practice into a sensory-based driven exploration. right? An awakening practice in which we allow those sensate experiences to teach us and guide us. And we'll add one more of these sensory systems into the mix, which is what Dr. Stephen Porges calls neuroception. Neuroception, as I've already mentioned, is this awareness of the nervous system in which we are detecting whether situations are safe or dangerous or life-threatening. And this is happening both inside and outside, right? So you might sense cues inside of your body about your heart rate, about how you're breathing. You might sense the look on someone's face. You might sense their body language. You might hear sounds. All of this is what the nervous system is attending to, right? And this can happen with or without conscious awareness. One of the key parts about our yogic journey and our embodied breath work for today is to bring more conscious awareness to neuroception, just like we were speaking before about bringing more conscious awareness to interoceptive information, so that the more that we link consciousness or awareness, attention, to these sensory states, the more that we can actually be in relationship to, learn from these different experiences inside, and be able to create change to what we're experiencing and how we're responding to our environment. One of the pieces here about neuroception is that it can match or mismatch the level of threat that's happening in our environment. So sometimes we might have an anxiety response to a safe situation, right, where maybe the nervous system is picking up on something below conscious awareness that we're reacting to, but in actuality we're safe. And on the flip side, some of us are under responders, in which we're actually not activating our defense response, even though we are in an unsafe environment, right? So you might relate to one or the other of these patterns, in which maybe, I'll just give a broad example of that latter one, someone who puts themselves in repeated risky situations, and but they're not keying into, they're actually putting themselves in danger. So by bringing consciousness to neuroception, we're bringing perception to the autonomic cues in the body and mind, which allows us to key in the quality of discernment. Is the autonomic response that I'm having accurate? And if not, how do I want to change how I'm breathing or moving to have a conscious relationship to calm my body down if it's unnecessarily keyed up, which is often the direction that many of us can relate to. So if there is interoceptive flooding, we can choose to engage in our exteroceptive awareness of our senses and our proprioceptive body awareness, which can help us ground and orient. So here we can see that sometimes we can get interoceptively flooded, right? By paying so much attention to the internal signals of the body, it might be overwhelming. And I'm going to pause share for just a second, just so we can see each other a little differently for a moment. And just say that, I have worked with so many people over the years where if we try and bring breath work, conscious breathing into our work together too quickly, it's overwhelming, right? And if you relate to that one, you're welcome to do the little raise hand function, right? It's pretty significant to recognize that, the breath can be both a resource, but it can also be a trigger. And so, as we work through some breathing together, you might notice that certain breaths serve as nourishing and relaxing, and other ones feel activating and maybe uncomfortable. Yoga isn't necessarily about only going toward the nourishment. We find in yoga what we call the edge, which is cultivating our ability to relate to the edge of discomfort, whether that's through an asana practice or a breath practice or a stillness practice, such as Yoga Nidra. We meet ourselves at the place where maybe we want to run, maybe we want to, there's something, some emotion that's being called to be felt. Maybe there's that edge of collapse, and we don't want to make the collapse wrong. What we want to do is to be able to turn toward the felt experience and to embrace ourselves there, to recognize that each nervous system state gives us access to something important. Though we're not here to reject anything that is true within you, but we do want to have sufficient resources to turn toward it with buoyancy, so that we're not, we're not harming ourselves or feeling stuck when we meet those edges, that we can touch the edge of discomfort and have a new experience as a result. So I'm going to go back into just a few more slides and then we'll do some breathing together. So in this particular model that I work from, we're always coming back to the ground of safety and choice. Because when we have no choice, we feel trapped. And when we feel trapped, the nervous system inevitably experiences that as a threat. So even within our yoga practice, I think so often we can attend yoga in the community, and even I will sometimes teach in this manner if I'm teaching a large group class. But it's a little bit like Simon says, like everybody lift your arms, everybody do this, right? And the language that we use is so important, because what we want to do is actually cultivate the ability to lean in to that quality of choice, to say, and I heard Roxlyn doing this in her class, like, I invite you to, or explore, or if this doesn't feel right, find what feels right for you, so that we keep dropping into the empowerment of choice. And that the postures become the secure home base for exploration. So the goal isn't to perfect a posture through its own anatomical shape, but the goal is to use the posture as that doorway into the inner sensate awakening, to what wants to move through us. And then it becomes this moment-by-moment exploration of body and breath and movement and sensation and emotion. Once again, all of you is welcome here. So with will and surrender, we recognize that these are polarities that need to exist in balance within us. And that when we choose a willful practice, maybe a warrior two stance or a downward dog, right? That we are choosing a shape, and then we can allow ourselves to explore what happens when we engage that strong intentionality, that attention of will. And then we can let go and allow the shape to move us and inform us and teach us. So it's this dance between the engaged attention and then the letting go and the formlessness, the following and the allowing of your intuition. When we look at the vagus nerve and pranayama, I want to break down this word pranayama for a moment. First of all, I think most of us know that stress and trauma can lead to shallow breathing or holding of the breath, tightness in the chest, over-breathing or hyperventilation, and feelings of panic. And that the breath is really the fastest way for us to regulate the nervous system. Our every inhale, we're engaging our sympathetic nervous system. Every exhale, we key into our parasympathetic nervous system. We're not going to make either one wrong, but we want to find the balance so that we're not stuck in one or the other. And that the pranayama, if we break down this word, prana refers to our vital life force energy. And there's some interesting kind of Sanskrit dialogue about how to translate the word pranayama, because the yama is translated as control. So some people say that pranayama is controlling the breath. However, the word ayama translates as liberation. So I'm going to invite you once again to hold that dance between will and surrender, to recognize that with sufficient control of the breath, we access the liberation, the freedom, the spaciousness. In its most simple form, when we slow down our breathing, say from 10 to 14 breaths per minute to 5 or 7 breaths per minute, we are immediately engaging the vagus nerve, and this leads to increased heart rate variability. Heart rate variability in its most simple form here, and we'll go into this in the October course, is basically that every time you inhale, you have an increase in your heart rate. Every time you exhale, you have a decrease in heart rate, and you can maximize and create coherence in that rhythm rather than it feeling jagged and out of control. There is a reflex that connects the vagus nerve back up to that medulla, and this is called the Herring-Brewer reflex. And here what we're looking at is that long, slow exhalation initiates a vagus nerve response, communicating right back up to the low brain. It's initiated either through the stretching in the smooth muscles of the lungs, right, or through the stimulation of the proprioceptors within the intercostals in the rib cage. So what Roxanne was doing is she's inviting that expansion of the side body or the moving of the intercostals in relationship to the lungs, in relationship to the arms, is this access to those vagus nerve connections, and that we are stretching the pulmonary receptors in the lungs either through the contraction on the exhale or through the inhalation. Likewise, as we contract and draw the ribs toward each other and inhale and expand, you're immediately interacting with all of those nerve fibers. And we'll do this together here briefly, shortly. So this reflex activates when we slow down respiratory frequency and increase the length of the exhalation especially. It leads to an increase in carbon dioxide. And the signals then go through the vagus nerve to the medulla to inhibit overbreathing. Okay? There's a inspiratory area, right? There's a respiratory center in the low brain. And the medulla will read the level of carbon dioxide and helps to reset breath rate and volume. So over time, if you practice breath regularly, you're actually going to create new habits in how you begin to breathe at that core autonomic nervous system level. You won't even have to keep thinking about it. You're going to change your breath rhythm. But here's the key. There's no single right way to breathe. We will all take different breath classes out there, and there's a lot of different people out there that are saying, well, only nose breathe, or do this like deep bellows mouth breath, and that's going to do this nitric oxide release, and do this one and do that one. In truth, they all have benefits. So as we explore a few different breath practices today together, we're going to invite you to use your own neuroception, your own curiosity, your own interoceptive awareness, your own proprioceptive awareness to say, how does this feel for me? What happens when I nose breathe or mouth breathe or alternate nostril breathe? So we'll do a few of these together. And this first one here, the Hakara and Ujjayi Pranayama, these are referring to a breath that engages a slight constriction at the back of the throat. And as we know, the vagus nerve travels here in the neck and throat. It innervates into the larynx and pharynx. And that when we create an audible quality to the breath, that audible quality also wakes up through the inner ear, another innervation of the vagus nerve. So in these two breath practices, the deep, slow breath through the nose and exhale through the mouth to begin, and then we'll turn this into the oceanic classic sound of the Ujjayi Pranayama. I'm going to stop share for a moment and we'll practice together. So as we come into the first of these two breaths, the Hakara, I'm going to invite you to inhale deeply through the nose, just whatever depth serves you, and to create a ha sound through the exhale. We'll breathe out of the mouth for the first 3 or 4 breaths here. Just inhaling. And exhale. So the quality of the ha is as if you're trying to fog up a mirror. It's as if you are trying to create that little bit of warmth. You'll feel the warm air of your lungs actually pass through the throat. And we'll do this together again, inhaling. And let's do it one more time. And pause there for just a moment. Just let the breath happen naturally. And notice, or if you want to do it again, just notice the sensation in your throat, how that might radiate into your chest, into your face, your arms. What are the accompanying emotions, if any, bubble up there, or thoughts, other sensations that arise? Perhaps you perceive a little shift energetically. And we're going to add on to this particular breath practice with Ujjayi Pranayama. It's basically the same breath practice, except this time we'll exhale through the nose. So the same quality of sound, but it will create this oceanic wave internally. Inhaling through the nose. And exhale. Continuing to breathe your own rhythm. You can think of this as activating a little bit of the whisper muscles. Perhaps even this quality of the wave like an ocean. You can imagine that your breath is a wave coming to the shore and receding. Ujjayi Pranayama translates into victorious breath. The victory is over the mind. I'm going to invite you to keep breathing in whatever manner serves you. I'm going to take a look at another breath practice and drop into another practice together. So, another key feature in the pranayama practices in the yogic tradition is to understand that there's bandhas, or locks in the body. And we want to treat these bandhas as soft yet strong. The first of these bandhas sits at the pelvic floor, and you can basically imagine here all of the muscles that connect between the tailbone, the sits bones, or the bony protrusions at the base of the pelvis, you can reach down and feel them, and your pubic bone in the front. And that the pelvic floor has this webbing of muscles diagonally and across, and that as you exhale, to the bottom of the exhale, you'll feel a little bit of engagement there. You can, some people say that you can imagine stopping the flow of urination, but I really want you to invite this as a deeper inward sensation, and very subtle. So rather than engaging Mula Bandha at 100%, I would say engage it at 10%, 15%, very gentle, soft, yet strong. And that from there we begin to draw the attention upward through a little engagement of the low belly. And then we can take our awareness to the diaphragm and to this connection of the ribs. You might even take your hands, and I'll just show this for a moment. Take your hands here to mimic the ribs. Okay? And that as you inhale, you can spread the ribs apart, and as you exhale, you can imagine that you're really knitting the space between where the ribs below the sternum join toward each other. And then inhale, creating space in the side bodies, really reaching through the diaphragm. And exhale, letting it draw back to the front side of your spine. One more like that. And exhale, engaging Uddiyana Bandha, gentle but strong, as you find a small contraction and a drawing back towards the front of the spine. Beautiful. Let your hands rest if they're by your ribs. And allow yourself to take a moment and just experience these first two Bandha breaths. Tracking with neuroceptive awareness what's happening in your nervous system. Your breath as it moves more naturally now, your heart rate, temperature, that interoceptive awareness. The third lock, the third bandha in the yogic tradition is called the neck lock. And the names don't necessarily translate quite beautifully. There's a much more elegant quality to this than locking something down. What we're doing is we are really allowing a little bit of a stretch through the back of the neck, a pulling back of the occiput, a slight tuck in the chin. But if you had a very sweet little, butterfly that you were allowing yourself to caress, we're not going to crunch down on anything here. So even if you imagine the thyroid gland in here, the shape of the butterfly, you want to allow yourself to caress the butterfly without crunching. And that what we're creating is warmth and awareness, just like we did with Ujjayi Pranayama. We bring more attentional sensate experience into the throat center. We can tie this all together through what we call Dirgha Pranayama, and I'll just show one quick slide on this, and we'll come back to see each other again. And in Dirgha Pranayama, before we go there, just one piece to say that very common in the yogic pranayama system, we have what we call kumbhaka, or retentions, in which we can actually pull the breath into parts of the body and pause and sense and feel what happens in the space created. And we can retain the breath at the bottom of the exhale, pausing in emptiness. Maybe we meet that little edge of kripa, or discomfort. And we allow ourselves to be informed by those edges of sensation, edges of discomfort. However, ideally the space of the kumbhaka creates this profound openness, that liberation, right? So that when prana moves, chitta moves, energy, right? And bliss is sometimes referred to, right? When prana moves when prana is without movement, when we go into the suspensions of the breath, the energy becomes still, the mind becomes still. The steadiness of prana becomes a, I've got my, come here. Get out of my way. The steadiness of prana, the yogi attains the steadiness and should thus restrain the vayu, the air. And by regular and prolonged practice of pranayama, the breath can be effortlessly suspended for lengthy periods of time. The breath is then considered to be long, dirgha, and subtle, which is highly supportive of the deep concentration and samadhi, or bliss state. So, things to play with, to imagine here. The Dirgha Pranayama is this complete or three-part breath in which we allow the spine to be long, and with a slow and steady breath through the nostrils, we can inhale in three parts into the belly, the rib cage, and into the upper lungs, the upper chest. The lung meridians sit right here below the clavicles, so we can kind of awaken that lung connection here. And then we can exhale from top to bottom, and we breathe in this soft circular fashion. We can retain breath at the bottom or at the top. Let's explore it together, shall we? So, we're doing good. All right, so we're putting this together with the locks, with the 3-part breath, and with the retention, and with gentleness and choice, right? So that your nervous system can sense you can do, you can drop out, whatever supports you here. On a gentle inhalation, begin to engage through the mood bond, 15%. I want you to imagine here that you have the fertile ground of the earth, and from that sprouts a seed. And that sprout begins to grow up along the front side of the spine through just a little bit of engagement of tension and awareness, arises to the diaphragm, a little bit of engagement there. Lifting up through the chest, you feel the sternum rise as the sprout finds a stalk that begins to express through the throat, a slight tuck of the chin, a lengthening through the back of the neck, and the sprout reaches out through the crown of the head at the top of the inhale. There's a flowering of our awareness. From the flower, we release the seed, the exhale. Releasing down, letting go of those created tension patterns, softening through the neck, the chest, the diaphragm, the belly, the root. The seed releases to the earth, plants itself in the fertile ground, and a brief pause. Let's find this in a more rhythmic fashion. Inhale the new sprout, allowing the stalk of the flower to begin to grow. As you inhale, that tension, that holding, that lifting, pelvic floor, knitting of the ribs, lifting of the chest, slight tuck of the chin. As you lengthen the back of the neck, the stalk releases, crown of head, flowers. Inhale, hold. As you're ready, exhale, seed releases. Gently releases back down to the earth, this natural cycle, life and death. As we recede back to the bottom of the exhale, we let go of the holding pattern and we pause. As you feel inspired, let the seed grow, let the breath come from within. Gentle tension in the pelvic floor, knitting of the ribs, lifting of the heart, tuck of the chin, lengthen the back of the neck, flower at the top, pause at the top. As you're ready, release the exhale. The seed releases back down with it. The thighs soften, third eye releases, allowing the jaw to be soft, tongue soft, neck and throat soft, heart, lungs held, supported, diaphragm softens, belly down to the bottom. Pelvic floor softens, let the breath settle into emptiness. Pause. One more time on your own, allowing the inspiration to guide the inhale, the flowering, and the timing of your breath. So a very gentle practice here. And it's up to you. What I find tends to happen is that the ujjayi gets softer and softer, subtler. often when we first learn Ujjayi Pranayama, and you can see this in a lot of like Ashtanga type yoga classes, is there's this intensity, right? And sometimes that can serve our practice, a very vigorous practice. But in the pranayama practice, the audible quality, the constriction becomes very subtle, gentle but strong. And that we can actually follow that little bit of the constriction up and down, and yet it takes us into a really open, liberated space. So we find that dance between the control and liberation, will and surrender. Let's do just a little bit more guided practice, and we'll do a little bit of movement with this. Does that sound all right? So one of my personal favorite breath practices is the Kapalabhati breath. And what I like, again, there's no single one right way to breathe. And what I like about the yogic pranayama practices is the deeper you go into it, you discover there's like 100 different breath practices, and each of them serves different purposes. This one, I will say that if you're pregnant or if you're menstruating as a woman, if you're have high blood pressure, or if you're prone to dizziness, be gentle or back off on this and just do long, deep breathing. But if this works in your body, explore this with me. It's referred to as skull shining breath. To me, it leaves me with a vibrant mind. It's very oxygenating for the blood. You can imagine here that there's just kind of clearing of the cobwebs. If you are someone that experiences brain fog or kind of a heavy feeling in your head sometimes, this can be really helpful. So we will explore this one together. You may choose to opt in or opt out. And sometimes it's nice, I'm not currently sitting back against a wall, but it can sometimes be nice to be in a chair or have the wall behind you, just to really have that sense of support at your back body with this. So in Kapalabhati breathing, we are inhaling and exhaling with a kind of a rapid drawback of the navel center, which is going to stimulate another nerve plexus right here, the solar plexus, and also a really central place that the vagus nerve innervates below the diaphragm into the organs of the body. So if we're tapping into that lower part of the vagus nerve that goes down into the belly, we're rhythmically pumping, and we're that serves as a kind of bellows for the lungs, where the lungs get to benefit from this new, fresh, oxygenated blood, and the heart benefits as well. So it's going to look and sound like this, and I'm going to have my hand here to give you a visual. The inhale through the nose, exhale, okay. And you can choose the pace. I'm going to show this more traditionally, which is with a faster pace, but feel this out for your body. So the inhale here, inhales and exhales are both through the nose, and we'll do about 30 of these together. So not right, I understand. It can be energizing, and that may or may not feel good to you right now. Inhale, breathing to the top, pausing for a moment if you like. Exhale, empty to completion. Pausing, that kambuka, retention at the bottom of the exhale. Let the inspiration come as it does. And now, a little bit of neuroception. Notice the change in your nervous system state in response to the breath. What's happening in your heart rate. What's happening in your sense of ease, or maybe a little keyed up in anxiety? Not right nor wrong, just notice. Maybe you feel excited, inspired. Maybe you feel tired. All of it is a dance of knowing yourself and building curiosity and non-judgment for whatever arises. So we're going to come into just a little bit of movement to integrate these breath practices that we've done so far. I'm going to slide a little further back onto my mat, and just a short movement practice. I know we don't have a lot of time. And let's just dive right in. So I'm going to stay seated for this first one, and just invite you to begin to just move your spine here in a seated position. So we've been sitting for a while. If you've done this sitting, just allow yourself to maybe rotate one direction and the other. Finding if you want to inhale nose, or maybe that ha sound, the hakari pranayam. Just, that's what my body wants to do for a few breaths. Just let something go. And from here, just a little bit of a seated cat-cow, just allowing your heart and spine to come forward and back. Again, you can do this in a chair or with your legs in front of you. None of this is too vigorous here. Just allowing your spine and your movement to help integrate what's happening inside. Noticing any emotional tone. I'll invite you to bring hands to your shoulders, open the elbows, maybe lift your chin, and exhale. Elbows can come together in front of the heart. Inhale, expand into the space you've created. Exhale, maybe a sound. So Uddiyana Bandha, that diaphragm lock, can come in really handy in this particular shape because we can draw the diaphragm back, stick the tongue out, and add in lion's breath. A little sound, a little release, a great way to let go of any tension you're holding on to. That's not serving you. One more like that. And then open the wings for a moment. Just let the arms fly, that liberation, the space you've created. Again, this time, maybe as you draw hands together, you can interlace fingers and press palms forward. And I'll show from this side, just really arching the spine. We'll do that one more time. Inhale, open. And exhale, maybe interlace hands, pressing forward. Beautiful. Coming back to center. And we'll do what I call the porpoise breath here. So you can find that undulation of the spine that we spoke about before, and allow yourself to imagine that you are moving your nervous system. You are working with the flexibility of the breath and movement together. Inhaling as head comes forward, lifts. Exhale back. One more like that. And this next one, an invitation to roll over the legs onto hands and knees. So for this next round here, it's allowing yourself to find that same porpoise breath here in a new position related to gravity. So if our tabletop is our secure base, allowing yourself to find the free flow, the undulation with breath guided by your sensations. So you might start here in this rhythmic, undulated, circular movement. And then I invite you to make it yours. Let your sensations be your guide. So you might be the porpoise that's going a little side to side, right? Undulating head and tail in this sideways swimming motion, maybe like an eel, huh? Right? Or you might find some barrel rolls of the spine. Let the breath move with you. Beautiful. And just a little bit more integration through movement. I'll invite you to curl your toes under, pressing into hands, into feet, lifting your hips. And we won't go beyond any more vigorous movement beyond our down dog, but take this down dog in that same curiosity, that same intuitive flow, so that this becomes the secure base for any movement. And if you prefer to keep knees on the earth, keep them there. You might explore this Ferris wheel motion as you take that porpoise, or maybe your dogfish now, and allow it to just move through space, your watery space here. Maybe the other way. All right, however you want to integrate, you can bend one knee and the other. Let your hands and feet, the end points of your nervous system, ground to the earth, feeling the crown of your head, the palate of the mouth. Sigh it out, let the head release, tailbone. Just one more reach to the sky, inhale. And exhale. Knees to the earth, and either sitting back in rock pose, hips on heels, but if that's not right on your knees, coming to any comfortable seat that works for you, and allowing yourself to pause in stillness. If you prefer to come into a resting shape on your back, equally valuable. But in our minute or so of stillness, let yourself track the subtleties of the residual movement happening inside. Your breath and heartbeat, windows into your nervous system. Sensations of temperature, heaviness or lightness. Windows into the interoceptive world, what's happening emotionally in the space you've created for you. Allowing yourself to feel the support of the earth beneath you, whether you're seated or laying down. And tracking your relationship to the earth, knowing that for all liberation to occur, we need to have that rooting support for the body, the heart, the mind, the spirit. You are welcome to stay in this quiet space as long as you would like. I will honor our time together with just a gentle offering, perhaps palm to palm in front of the heart, or if you prefer, palm over palm embracing, supporting your heart, allowing the heart to rise into the space you've created, the space of support and love. And if you choose in your own way, we can offer this liberation in service of all beings. Namaste.
Thank you so much. Beautiful. It's an emotion too. Thank you, as always, for your brilliance and your integration between the world of yoga and therapy. It's so embodied. So, thank you.
A lot of fun for me. Thank you.